when you're signing your contract, even if it's non-negotiable, right? They give you a contract and they say, here, don't even bother having anyone look at it because we're not going to change anything. It's non-negotiable. You still got to know your risk. You still got to have it looked at so you know what questions to ask. Because, again, so risk, whether they'll negotiate anything or not, risk. Can you get out? How do you terminate? When can you? What about malpractice tail insurance? What about a non-compete? What about how you're compensated on termination? What about, risk of things that aren't in the contract, like caps on call or PA coverage? But portion of that risk which is again should be done on the front end. People call us and they'll say, John, I signed a thing 2 years ago. Can you help me get out? We're like, well, what do you have? They're like, I don't know. Nobody looked at it. I just signed it. I'm like, oh crap. And then those are the ones that you got to break news, say like, look, it's going to cost 60 grand to get out of this. They go, I have $60,000. So I say all that because the risk assessment, right? What's the risk, right? Well, termination, non-compete, tail insurance, yeah, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. What's the benefit? Well, it's about money. It's about benefits like vacation time. It's about, retirement accounts. It's about, income and bonuses. But if we go back to that risk piece, that non-compete is a big portion of the risk. And it's vital that a physician understands not just the non-compete, but the restrictive covenant. So the restrictive covenant would be, what you can't do either during or after the job, most likely both. So a restriction could be you can't work, you can't moonlight while you work here, or you can't own a pizza company while you work here unless you get our permission, depending on how the contract's worded. Another restriction would be you can't hire one of our employees or contractors after you work here. Another restriction would be you can't solicit the patients. They're ours, not yours. So if you leave, you can't take the patients with you. You don't own the patient. Those are all types of restrictive covenants that are not non-competes. Now, you may also have a non-compete, and non-competes would say for this, they're time bound, right? So for so many months or so many years, they're geographically bound. You can't do something in a certain area, whether it's a certain number of counties or a certain radius, and then obviously the more specific, the better. It's specific to your specialty or not. How detailed is it to your specialty? Is it, what's the time zones? And I think that's all super important for a physician to understand the non-compete. So if that non-compete represents 10% of your risk or 20% of your risk in a deal and you just take it out, that's great. Your benefit to risk ratio dramatically improves just by that. But will it automatically increase salaries? Are physicians' salaries suppressed because of non-competes? A lot of people say yes. I don't know. The new MGMA data is just out and we've been analyzing it for weeks over here. And I do know that Massachusetts is one of the lowest paying states when it comes to specialty and primary care pay. And yet Massachusetts hasn't had non-competes in decades. And I look at the states that are paid the best, and there are states where non-competes are very active. So again, if a physician could just leave one job to go to the next because of a $2 per RVU difference, I think if they could do that, which they have been able to do that in certain markets, and I realize there's lots of other stuff going on from payer data and access and market demands and everything else, but we don't see salaries flushing up in states faster than others anyways, or even in the highest paid states, in states without non-compete. So how would it directly impact physician compensation? I don't think for the masses, I think the answer is it doesn't. For that highly trained surgeon, I think the answer is it might. For that super productive pulmonologist, I think the answer is it might, because they could go back and say, look, if I can't get $3 more per RVU, the hospital next door will give it to me. Right. Now, again, can you solicit the patients? Maybe not. So again, just because there's not a non-compete doesn't mean there's not a non-solicitation. And your patients may or may not follow, and you may or may not continue to generate 12,000 RVUs a year. So there's so many we don't know, but
non-competes are pretty strict and solid, and non-solicit is kind of I'm using simple terms. It's much more complicated, but non-solicit is a little bit more dialed down version. It's less restrictive, but you still can't go after your patients. Non-compete is nothing in this area. You can't do anything. And they're pretty common, the non-compete. So that's important. I think the takeaway with non-competes is that everybody should know what their non-compete limits them to and ahead of time before they even sign. Because if you're going to an area, especially if you're going to an area, well, I think anytime, but if you're going to an area I grew up here or my family or whatever, it's especially important. And I have worked with many people that basically kind of had to leave an area because a job didn't work out. And that's kind of not fair. It's your job dictating.
Or do locums for a year. Yeah.
Or had to go away and come back, which is just a mess. But how willing are employers to budge on these non-competes in your experience?
Yeah, it's a great question, man. And I think it depends on the situation. right? I think, again, why is the contract terminating in the first place? Is the service line just not busy? So you're not making as much money as you'd like, so you'd like to do something else? They might be fine letting you go and forgiving the non-compete because they're not doing what the program's not doing what they thought it would. Is the reason that you would like to stay in town because they don't have the technology? Well, that might be different. Do you want to open your own practice? So would you stay on at the hospital? And but I mean, again, there's some contracts have carve outs for private practices. So it'll say you can't work within 25 miles of my hospital. However, if you want to stay on staff at my hospital and open a private practice, you're more than welcome to. Right. And again, it depends on the specialty. But if you're going to stay on staff at my hospital and admit your patients to my hospital, or if you're a surgeon, you'll do your cases at my hospital, and you're going to open a private practice and run your private practice like you want to, which means I don't have to pay for your malpractice insurance. I don't have to pay for your staff. And I don't have to put you on my EMR system, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. The hospital's like, I'll take that every day. So for the most part, again, every story matters, which is why it's important to call somebody like Contract Diagnostics. But that's where I think, when it comes to, even if you want to get out of a contract, like, you said, like, read your contract. No. Like, read your contract, but call us or call somebody like us and say, here's my story. Here's what the contract says. What do you recommend? Because we might be able to get very creative with ideas and strategies and tactics around helping a physician transition from one position to the next, or leave a position and ask for forgiveness around the restrictive covenant or the non-compete. So that creativity that we've learned over 12 years on what's possible, I think, is something that we love sharing with everybody. And that's why, whatever the situation is, the physician should definitely seek help and ideas, because maybe you read it, you think it's so solid, it's so concrete.